So I'd like to introduce Dr. Rebecca Patrick from the School of Population and Global Health, University of Melbourne. Last time you saw Rebecca, she may have been at a different university. She's just jumped ship. So it is the same person. So Rebecca's presentation is Keeping the Future in Mind, Promoting Mental Wellbeing in a Climate Impacted World. And we just had Grace speak about the Green Futures Now project. And Rebecca requested that she speak after Grace because she was really hoping that we would have that youth voice. And there's actually some comments about providing youth voice as well up on the wall. So Dr. Rebecca Patrick is a climate and health researcher at the School of Population and Global Health. And I'm going to throw to you now. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda, I think it is, and I can't see anyone apart from myself and Lighthouse Theatre, but thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak about climate change, mental health, with a particular focus on young people. If you just bear with me, I'll share my screen. I do have a few slides that will give you a point of focus. Linda, is that looking okay at your end?
Yes, that's fine.
Excellent. Okay, you're absolutely right. I have a couple of affiliations, including my newest with the University of Melbourne. But for a very long time, I've worked at Deakin University. And of course, we have a wonderful campus in Warrnambool and across regional Victoria. So I still strongly identify with Deakin work, much of which is I'm carrying forward into the conversation today, but I'll also be taking it with me along with the relationships and the collaborations built over time with Deakin. So let's dive straight in. And of course, my slides aren't moving. There we go. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. I'm on Kulin Nation land here today with another name of the space called Kulin Nation land, or Yakalit Willam, which means river dwellers, and such a delightful place to live. Okay, like I said, I do have multiple affiliations, which drives this research and advocacy work at the nexus of climate, mental health and young people, with my role at the Climate and Health Alliance and also my long-term role at Deakin with the Health Nature Sustainability Research Group. So today I'm going to preface the conversation with building the link between nature, climate change, mental health, and therefore our priority group being young people, and then draw your attention to some of the practice developments that may be particularly relevant to the people that are on the line or in person. And I can't see you, but hello, hello, hello. Let's jump in. This first slide, and I'm hoping you can see some of the tiny writing. Basically, from left to right, it steps out the link between nature and mental health. And fundamentally, it puts forward what we all probably know at a personal level, the importance of nature for psychological and physiological well-being. So we need time in and around nature to give us access to and exposure to those active ingredients of heat, light, biodiversity, right down to the kind of atom level, the ingredients to drive physiological and psychological states for relaxation, attention, vitality, and also importantly, sleep. And of course, there's very strong literature to demonstrate the health outcomes associated with access to and regular contact with nature, which is over there on the pink side. So what's then the link with climate change, nature and mental health? Well, climate change on one hand is disrupting that essential relationship that we have with nature. And this slide tries to encapsulate that idea, showing that as a result of the climate change impacts that you have been hearing about and experiencing in regional and rural Victoria, are impacting our physical health and well-being, but importantly, mental health outcomes. And what we have in the middle, off to the right of this slide, are some of those mental health outcomes related to stress, anxiety, depression, strains on our social relationships, including domestic violence, substance abuse, and more at the clinical end, post-traumatic stress disorder. And this slide also demonstrates that mental health and physical health are kind of tied up, and the relationship to community health outcomes. Now, if you've listened to the media, or you've been working in health, or you're in local government or emergency services, you may have heard of these terms relating to this link between climate change and mental health. And so let me just step you through them. So anxiety, you may have heard of the terminology related to eco-anxiety, climate anxiety, and eco-paralysis. And there's an emerging body of evidence that's trying to track eco-anxiety within the population and specific population groups. And in a moment, I'll speak to that. You may have heard of anger linked to worry about the environment and the lack of action or inaction from local right through to global scales, and particularly related to government inaction. And then eco-depression and eco-despair, about the existential threat, which is climate change. Then grief, ecological grief, and solastalgia, which are ideas and concepts that have been around for a while, but are really developing in this climate change mental health spaces. As researchers begin to develop tools to measure this and the level in populations, and trauma associated with experiencing a climate change event, whether that's a pre-trauma, looking into the future, visualising the impact of climate change. There's some research to say that there's potential for pre-traumatic stress as well as post-traumatic stress. And there's my daughter ringing after school. We'll just pop her on mute. As much as we love her, we do need to work in our professional life. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so where is this link between climate change and mental health so evident? Well, like I said, before an event, an extreme weather event, for example, floods and bushfires, we may see an uptick in anxiety, anticipatory trauma, and also grief. During stress and panic, and then afterwards, cultural displacement and post-traumatic stress. So, and these conceptualizations have been useful not only for researchers, but increasingly for psychologists, psychiatrists, and people working with mental health outcomes and working with people in the community, ranging from subclinical, worry, deep concern, right through to the clinical outcomes that we see in terms of suicide and PTSD, for example. Now let's look at some of the research, and then I'll take us over to some research that speaks to the rural and regional context as well as young people. But I've been involved in a nationwide study, and this is just the highlights of that study, where we gleaned a representative sample. So we looked into rural and regional contexts. We went into all states and territories of Australia, and we sought to speak to, survey young people through to older age groups. And what's significant in terms of the findings is most Australians now subscribe to saying they've experienced directly a climate change impact in their life. And that's important, because if you believe you've had a direct experience of climate change, you're more likely to actually take action. We also found at the time of the study that people were more worried about climate change, up to 67%, than they were actually worried about or personally concerned about COVID-19. And this study was actually run during some of our deepest lockdowns in 2020. We also found that the measure of eco-anxiety, that somewhere between a fifth and a quarter of young people aged between 18 and 34 were showing signs and symptoms of anxiety related to climate change and environmental change. We also found that people that had a direct experience of a climate change event, 26% of them were meeting the screening criteria for PTSD. Now, let's hear about how people are coping, importantly, as we move to some of the solutions as well. We also measured coping strategies for this nexus between climate change and mental health. And the ways that people are dealing with it at an individual level is becoming informed about problems and solutions, viewing and visiting nature, and taking action to change their own lifestyle to be more sustainable. Okay, let's hear from young people, and importantly, the topic that I wanted to focus on today. Here is some of the quotes that bubbled up through the survey, and what I've highlighted here in bold are some of the quotes that broadly represent some of the thinking and emotional responses to the issues of climate change and mental health. And what we can see in the first one is hopelessness when thinking about the future, particularly related to the powerlessness given what was happening at government and political levels, and the power that big business has to influence future security. Feelings of being overwhelmed or frustrated and really quite angry about the situation. And then this one down the bottom talks about being able to have confidence that our governments are acting concretely through policy as well as funding initiatives. And that's at a local level, which is most relevant to us in this forum today, but also at state and federal levels. Now, I think I won't have any arguments, potentially not, that young people are a priority population group, but our research, as well as the body of literature and evidence that we have available today, also demonstrates that scientists and activists working in this space, environmental workers who are at the front line of climate change impacts, are particularly at risk of the mental health impacts of viewing and working in environmental change. Indigenous communities who've lived on land and care for land, and you know, the connection to country is so strong, and also people with direct experience of climate change. Now, back to young people, I don't only want to highlight the research we've done, but other peak organisations in Australia have looked at this. We found that young people between 18 to 24 are one of the most vulnerable populations. Around 50% of Victorian young people are identifying really strong and negative feelings of sadness, anger, and this is all Sustainability Victoria evidence developed a year or two ago now. But the last 2 points here talk about what are the protective factors for young people. Probably not surprising for people that work already in this sector, but youth with a strong sense of community and connection with the natural environment fare better and are more resilient in a climate impacted world. And also those with self-efficacy, resilience and agency and are participating in climate action. Right, let's listen to the voices of rural and regional young people, in particular young women. This research is hot off the press, only just completed a month or two ago by a young woman under 30 completing her master's in health promotion. And I have consent to share this, is that, and this diagram, I'll talk you through this in a moment, that there's a duality in the climate change experience, that we hold a range of emotions, and that's what this image of refracted light is representing over on the right-hand side, that we have distress, sadness and fear coexisting with feelings of hope, optimism and excitement. And that's certainly the experience of the young women that we spoke to and developed stories with in the rural and regional context across Australia. The young women that we spoke to in this qualitative research were looking for a broader conceptualisation of climate change mental health impacts. So it sweeps in the empowerment, the strengths-based analysis, which is the way that we try to do research as well. And also they're very keen to have a space for reflection and acceptance of climate change thoughts and feelings, you know, not to be denied, dismissed of those feelings, and having opportunities to process those feelings. And this really powerful quote from one of the young women involved in this research around, that divide or sense of experience of divide between urban living and regional and rural living here from Charlotte. Now, also the gorgeous young women that were willing to share their lived experience and stories of living and working in rural and regional context spoke about the strategies that they think would be most effective for young people's health and mental health and well-being. They talked about the importance of social supports in relation to climate change and health impacts. They were really keen for locally driven and inclusive interventions, co-designed, co-produced interventions. They're really keen to see opportunities for learning and sharing knowledge across the multiple networks that are actually popping up in this area. And importantly, having a seat at the table, if not, head of the table in terms of youth and female leadership. Now, that was young women's specific experiences of climate change and mental health. I don't have anything more to share on other gendered experiences of climate change and mental health, but I'll keep moving. And this beautiful quote here from Imogen: I think having women in charge of rural areas would be great. Okay, I'm going to get to some practice implications because I know I've probably got about 5 minutes now, have I? Is that correct, Linda? The factors that influence climate-related mental well-being. We know that it's a systems problem. You're probably talking about the different systems and partners that need to be engaged in solutions today. And we know, notwithstanding, it's the same within climate change in the mental health space. Everything from government inaction or government action that we're starting to see in Australia can be protective or negative factors that influence mental health outcomes. We know social media can go either way for young people, in particular, as it can be a place where it's catastrophic and it's frightening if the narrative is embedded like that, or social media for young people around this climate change and health issues can actually be a space for sharing, connecting, and sharing information. Okay, here's a couple of slides from my colleague who's a clinical psychologist and also a researcher around practice. So any of you that are working in the mental health space or in a health professional, some of the key messages here is that climate anxiety is not necessarily to be solved or medicated, but rather an important encounter with our awareness of what's happening in the world. And rather than pathologizing what we do to support each other, what can we do to stop the freeze or the panic or the escalation of concern? Now, there's some fantastic resources that are freely available from the Australian Psychological Society, Coping with Climate Change. If I had more time, I'd unpack that, but I'd recommend anyone in the health professional space or working with young people, if not parents, would draw on this important resource. In terms of working with climate change, psychological distress, there's that sort of cognitive information seeking. Behavioural, which is taking action, can actually provide relief for that concern and worry. Relational strategies, so social support and spending time with like-minded people that share those concerns. And then there's the emotional strategies and associated with regulating our response to threats. Again, if I had more time or if my colleague was here, he'd certainly unpack them. Now, another really important area of for coping, which I foregrounded from that national survey I spoke about, is the body of research that demonstrates the relationship between contact with nature and its multiple positive effects. There's multiple pathways, there's lots of science already available, but the specific benefits are improved attention, which could be helpful for that sort of functional aspect of worry and concern, particularly for young people. It can stimulate creativity and help with regulation and mood. And contact with nature in childhood has lasting impacts on mood and also personality in adults. So there's so many benefits of nature contact, and it should be a part of our toolkit in the climate change and mental health space. One level out, as I move towards wrapping up, we've got some really exciting initiatives happening at the national scale, and I anticipate that my colleague Remy from CAHA spoke about this, but we've certainly got national policy around climate and health to look forward to and to be implemented in the not too distant future. The healthy, which being derived from the healthy, regenerative and just framework of CAHA. And we know that, well, I know because I'm a part of CAHA, but mental health is certainly a part of the strategic priorities in that national strategy. We've got excellent resources that we can tune into on Spotify, an expert panel on this area, and some of our peak health associations are starting to pick up these issues and run information sessions. Another nod to the amazing resources that colleagues right across Australia and internationally have been developing. Doctors for the Environment Australia on the left has developed a resource. And we've also got the Health Promotion Association Foundation. So there's multiple resources and podcasts that you can draw on to support the development of your own practice. So in summary, and before I hand back, and I'm wondering if there will be any questions at your end, many young people are experiencing this psychological distress as it relates to climate change. There are developing therapeutic responses that we can draw from, but there is a little bit of work to do to kind of nuance some of those approaches, which is an exciting space that we can keep an eye on over the next few years. Contact with nature is an important health promotion priority in the context of climate change and keeping our young people connected to nature. And also that peak health associations alongside youth-led organisations are really leading practice, policy and advocacy and resource development. And there's a lot of toolkits that we can draw on to guide us in our day-to-day practice. So I'll stop sharing and be guided by you on whether we've got any time for any questions.
Yes, thank you. Has anybody got any questions for Rebecca? Yep. Oh, no, they've all got stage fright, Rebecca.
I think it's been a long day, hasn't it?
It has. They've been very attentive. I might let them out early. Yeah.
Oh, I applaud that. I'm so sorry I couldn't get down there. I hope you've had a fantastic day. Let us know if there's anything I can contribute or forward or link you into, but certainly in the climate change and mental health space, it's the field is well underway. The work that we're doing is very much co-designed with young people, which is, you know, is just a given, and it's just a must-have in the ways that we work, particularly in relation to climate change and mental health.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Remy was here from CAHA and spoke earlier today, which was great too. So thanks, made lots of new friends in the room from the health services. So, oh, there is one question.
Okay.
We're just fixing up the volume.
There we go. Hi, Rebecca. Norma from Deakin. How are you doing?
Hi, Norma.
I came in to see you, didn't realize you would be virtual, but still lovely to see you. I just wondered about, you know, the messaging around climate change. And obviously, you know, when you're advocating for change and you want people to take it seriously, particularly people in positions of power, you know, you need the messaging to be strong. But how do you balance that then with messaging around young people who are then anxious as a result of us trying to drive forward this on the agenda? How do you balance that?
Yeah, look, and a lot of thought has gone into the communication of climate change messages along the way. You know, there's been the sort of want a better word, grim reaper approach, and we know that that can actually be paralysing. So for our politicians, we need to really tap into their ways of knowing and understanding these issues. And, you know, the science is one part, but certainly, you know, the cost benefit of mitigation and adaptation is another part of communicating the messages. But particularly for young people, in our experience with our research and working with young people, it's that balanced messaging. You know, it's not about hiding the truth, it's sharing the truth, and but also surrounding that conversation with what's possible, what's happening in the space, and trying to support young people to see where their sphere of influence is. Yeah. You know, if you live at home with a parent or sisters or brothers, you can start there and say having conversations or switching your lights off. And so, yeah, trying to identify the sphere of influence so they have, otherwise it can be overwhelming. So that's the usual place that I would start with.
Thank you.